Cheaper. Settlers Park.
You guys ready? Ready?
What's his name? Oh, yeah, Tennessee.
I now call to order the Thursday, January 23rd, 2020 meeting of the City of Sugar Land Planning and Zoning Commission. Item 2, public comment. We have 2 items scheduled for public hearing tonight, so if you wish to speak on those items, I would ask that you wait until those come up for the public hearing. But if there's anything else you'd like to address the commission with regard to, now is the time to come forward. Anyone who would like to address the commission can do so now. Any of the matters on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 3. The minutes, 3A, consideration of an action on the minutes of the January 14th, 2020 meeting. Does anyone have any changes? Okay.
Second.
Okay. Motion to approve by Commissioner Landine, seconded by Commissioner Stevens. Any discussion? Go ahead and vote. Okay, and it passes. Item 4, public hearing. 4A, receive and hear all persons desiring to be heard on a proposed conditional use permit for the establishment of Take 5 oil change on approximately 0.828 acres located at the intersection of Highway 6 and Settlers Way. Laura. Hang on just a second. Commissioner Watley, did you? Not yet, okay. Go ahead.
So we'll begin tonight with a little overview about the property. So it is located at the northwest intersection of Settlers Way and Highway 6. This is the reserve, this is Market at First Colony, and we're discussing Reserve C. It's a commercial reserve, 0.828 acres in size. It was a gas station when it was annexed into the city, and remained a gas station until 2008 when it was demolished, and the site has remained vacant ever since then. The proposal is for a Take 5 oil change facility, which does require a CUP in the B2 district. An aerial map and analysis of the surrounding uses. It is primarily shopping centers. There's a shopping center behind it, as well as across the street and across Settlers Way. These shopping centers have a mixture of retail and restaurant uses. There's a couple of freestanding banks, and there's also a Shell gas station that's immediately across Highway 6 on the opposite corner. The future land use plan does identify this as a neighborhood activity center, and also the future land use plan does recommend for CUPs. It has several suggestions, especially about automotive-related areas, including having pitched canopies for gas stations, the bays to be perpendicular to any major highways, and review of on-site circulation so that there's minimal impact on public streets. So a little more detail about this facility. They do propose to construct an oil change facility that is 1,531 square feet in size. It would have 3 oil change bays, a small office, and a restroom on site. Facilities are classified in our new zoning matrix under auto repair and services minor, which does require a CUP in B2 districts. Other uses that also require CUP are animal boarding, dry cleaning facilities, car dealerships, and other auto repair and services, both major and minor, require a CUP in B2 districts. CUP just allows the commission to get a closer look and to require certain exhibits be, just bring certainty to the physical layout. With the site plan, you can require specific exhibits, landscaping, other things like that. You can require that the site operate exactly as you allow it to. The proposed oil change facility would grant access via existing driveway off of Settlers Way, as well as through a cross-access agreement with the Market at First Colony. There would be 2 interior driveways. The existing entrance off of Highway 6 is proposed to be closed, which would reduce points of conflict with the major intersection at Settlers Way. There would be room for 9 vehicles queued in bay-specific lines, as well as extra room around the perimeter of the site. And the existing landscape is supplemented with 11 trees, additional hedge around the perimeter so that there will be 100% shielding, and interior landscaping around the building itself. A little bit of the traffic analysis. There was a traffic impact analysis that was given to us and concurred with by our engineering and public works traffic department. They took a look at queuing as well as the several intersections around the site. The one on Highway 6 as well was suggested by staff to be closed in order to move forward with the process. So a Google excerpt to help give you a better idea of what the site looks like right now. This is Highway 6 down here and Settlers Way. This is the entrance that will remain off of Settlers Way for direct access from the public road. And these two are the proposed entrances from Market at First Colony. This would be slightly adjusted in order to create better flow through the site across here to get to the back of the building where the bays will be entering. And then this is the large stub off of Highway 6 that will be removed. So traffic will have to come in through Market at First Colony if they're coming from Highway 6. A couple of site photographs. We have the courtesy public hearing sign. This image was taken from the stub at Highway 6 looking across to Market at First Colony behind the site. And then this is taken from the cross access that is on the west side of the property looking towards Settlers Way. And then also from the entrance at Highway 6 that is proposed to be closed, looking across where that closure will be, and then towards the intersection. So it is right there at the corner of the intersection. So this is the site plan, the overall site plan. So as you can see, there's room for 9 cars here immediately, and then more room for cars along the perimeter. There is the required amount of parking, and even if you don't include bays, which our development code does allow you to include bays, so there's actually an excess of parking. These entrances from Highway 6 and Market at First Colony and then Settlers Way. And then traffic would circulate around from this side to go in and then out through this side of the facility. The small office and bathroom would be here on the north side of the building. This is the landscape plan that we received. In gray is all of the existing landscaping that they are preserving. There's only one tree here that they are removing, and there's a small row of bushes that they are proposing to be replaced here by a larger hedge and 2 large trees. And then here across where Highway 6 used to be accessed, full hedges and also several red oak trees. Some colored building elevations for you to give a better idea of what the building will look like. This would be the view from Settlers Way. So you would see the front of the building where cars are exiting. This is where cars would enter, so the view from Market at First Colony. And then this would be the view from Highway 6, so a very limited, small brick building. The circulation plan that we were provided shows right in, right out only entrances off of Settlers Way, and then entrance and exit from Market at First Colony. And again, that's showing traffic entering from the west and driving to the east to exit. Some initial points for the Commission's consideration. It is a vacant commercial reserve that is currently zoned B2. The site has a history of auto-related businesses. It was previously a gas station that was annexed in 1989 and then was removed by 2008. There are no shared property lines with single-family residential, which I know is typically a concern whenever it comes to auto-related businesses and CUPs. So that's not as much of a concern in this case. The near property does have similar intensity use, including several shopping centers, some freestanding banks, and a gas station. The proposed use does appear to be generally compatible and well-suited to this location due to the classification of the streets being a state highway and a major collector. And the Commission also can place whatever conditions they would deem necessary, which can ensure that the property is developed as proposed and mitigate any negative impacts from the surrounding area. We also have a list of the proposed exhibits that we have included, including site plan, circulation, landscape plans, building elevations and photometrics. But there are also some suggested conditions from past CUPs for automotive-related CUPs, including that garage doors would have to have bays to be closed in the evenings, limiting the size of vehicles that can be serviced at the site, as well as where service can happen. It needs to happen inside only, no outside storage or servicing, and no outside speaker systems. These have all been suggested in the past for CUPs. The public hearing criteria were met, mailers sent out, and notifications were posted. We did receive one general inquiry by phone, but it was simply about the time of the meeting and what was proposed for the site. Staff is not currently aware of any opposition. The next step would be to hold a public hearing and then have the discussion and direction from the commission. We do anticipate consideration and action at a later meeting. Next up, we would have a member from Take 5. He is a construction manager. His name is Keith. He'll come up and do a little more presentation for you.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Good evening, my respected board members. I currently live in Dickinson, Texas. I'm familiar with Sugar Land and the Houston area. Very pleased to present our project to you. So we included on this PowerPoint, what the building would look like, very similar. This is a building we've built in the past year, so very similar to that look, what we're expecting to build for the city of Sugar Land. So, real quick, we just have the information of the architect, landscape architect. Just wanted to go a little background. Take 5 was found in Metairie, Louisiana in 1984. Take 5 and its affiliates currently operate 500 plus Take 5 branded locations in 12 states. Take 5 is poised to enter 5 new states and expand by more than 80 locations for this year in 2020. We plan to grow our company-owned and franchise store footprint more than 2,000 locations within the next 10 years. So real quick, just as far as our operation, what you expect from us is a low-impact, clean, and efficient oil loop center. Noise control, we don't use any powered equipment. It's all mechanical tools. You won't hear any impact wrenches, none of that noise. So the noise control is very, very limited. Only hand tools are used. No underground storage tanks. All storage is handled with environmentally friendly maintenance systems. It's a unique shallow pit design, so no digging underground basement. So if you look at that picture around the yellow barricade, that pit is only about 30 inches deep. So what happens is a patron would drive in, a tech would go into the pit, change the oil. Our oil changes usually last between 5 to 7 minutes. The customer doesn't even get out of the car. It's a fast lube change. Compact and flexible retail building designs, no overnight on-site parking. All vehicle access to server bays occurs on-site. Minimal light impact. Height of proposed building remains similar to existing sites around. Meets building setback requirements, and parking requirements are met. So, kind of familiar with the site plan. This is what we're proposing. I believe we meet all the requirements on our site plan. And then obviously you know about the landscape plan. You'll have landscape all the way around the building. So it's a brick building. You will have a tower, part of the construction, the tower with a black metal roof. No obtrusive views from the streets. Additional landscape screening provided between the building and the residential. Dumpster enclosure finishes match proposed building. So the dumpster enclosure where the dumpster goes, it's going to look exactly like the main building. And proposed building located at front of site. So again, you'll have seen this just a few minutes ago, but that's our color elevations of the expectation you should get from Take 5. Any questions?
If there are any, we will pose them to you after the public hearing.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
At this time, I'll open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone who would like to come forward and speak on this matter. Anyone? Okay, we will now close the public hearing then, and we will move on to review of and discussion on proposed conditional use permit for the establishment of Take 5 oil change on approximately 0.828 acres located at the intersection of Highway 6 and Settlers Way. Anyone who has any questions, go ahead, Commissioner Watley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a couple of questions. First of all, I like the whole thing. I think it looks really nice. I drove by there, and it's very conducive to the neighborhood, so you did a great job, everybody. My questions are basically, out of curiosity, I see the traffic flow on this, and I really like the traffic flow. How do you maintain that? I mean, people are going to be turning right and left. If you're just putting arrows on the ground, or is there something else to keep the traffic flowing in the desired direction?
Yes, there will be directional signage, small directional signage as posted at each of the entrances and exits, as well as arrows and other signage around the area.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
We put signage to let the patrons know which way to flow the traffic, and then on top of the pavement, we put directional arrows as well in yellow.
Perfect, because the way it looks is great. If you can maintain that, it'd be awesome.
Absolutely.
Secondly, on the shrubs and landscaping, the last thing we want to do is have an obstructed view when people try to turn in or turn out. Is the landscaping going to allow that?
Yes, it will not be obstructive. There'll be a 3-foot height maximum, which is what is legally allowed.
Okay, those are my two questions, and kudos on a 5-minute oil change.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Andy, did you have a question?
Yes, ma'am, thank you. I've got just two questions. The first one, and forgive me if I don't remember, I remember when the gas station went away. I don't remember what happened with the tanks that were under there. I don't remember if they had to remediate the site when they closed up, or if the gas tanks are still underground.
No, the gas tanks do not exist anymore. They have been taken care of, either filled with concrete or removed completely. I'm not sure which one, but they have been taken care of legally.
Okay. And so there's no issue with even the shallow pit that's being proposed?
There won't be any issue.
Okay. The next question I have revolves around the traffic survey as well. Very familiar with this intersection. Just an opening question, what time of day was that traffic study done? Because there are times of day...
Done for all time of day.
Okay.
Morning, afternoon, and weekend.
Yeah, there's times of day, especially when soccer practice gets out, that intersection is a mess. Specifically around those time frames, and it's one of the few main feeders onto Highway 6 that doesn't have a double left turn on it, and I didn't know if that was going to be needed to keep the traffic flow moving along Settlers Way.
Go ahead. I'll answer.
One of them you've got to know.
I've got to answer. And good evening, Commissioners. My name is Jason Bond with Sugar Land Public Works Traffic Division. And Commissioner, to answer your question, you mentioned about the left turn at Settlers Way at Highway 6. Can I ask which direction? Are you talking
So if you were going from this, from the neighborhoods, where would that be? As we look on the map here, if you're coming down Settlers Way to Highway 6, the Settlers Way portion we see here on the map, especially during soccer season, as the traffic comes out of Lost Creek Park, that stoplight can back up 20-plus cars trying to turn left from that intersection onto Highway 6. And if we're now competing with a new entrance here, to enter into the quick lube, I didn't know, and that's why I asked what time this was taken, because as a person that uses that intersection frequently, I'm very familiar with this traffic conundrum. And this Settlers Way is one of the only stoplights that feeds onto Highway 6 in this direction that doesn't have a double left.
Just so you know. I just wanted to remind you that this is an existing entrance. It's not new. It's just going to be newly utilized by the site. So it already exists, the sub.
It does exist, but it doesn't go anywhere. It goes into a grassy lot and hasn't been used now for 12 years. I think the traffic conditions have changed in those 12 years.
So I have a question really quickly. What time of day are you seeing the issue with the traffic stacking up?
Usually between 6 p.m. and 9 p.m.
Okay, and so I'm wondering what the hours of operation would be for this business.
So Monday through Friday, we're 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Saturday, we are 8 to 6, and then Sundays, we're 10 to 4.
So it seems like there's only an hour of overlap there.
Yeah, it may not be an issue with your hours of operation. That's why I was asking more about when the
So
traffic...
generally, when you look at sales, like the last hour of operation from 6 to 7, maybe one car. So pretty much, they wrap up by 6 o'clock.
All right, fair enough. Thank you very much.
Sure thing.
Any other questions, Andy? You're done? Okay. Matt, go ahead.
Just a few questions as well. Also, I mean, I think this is very well done. I agree with that. With respect to the traffic flow, it just, again, and this may be more of a consideration for the business. I mean, it seems fine to me, but it does look like there's some opportunity for some confusion because assuming there is more than one car, which I hope is the goal of the business, you're going to have people coming in from the north side and they're going to be queued up in that direction. You also have people coming in from, I guess it's the southwest side, and they're going to be queued up. It looks to me like they're going to kind of meet in the middle to get lines into the bays. And then there also appears to be another issue when you're leaving the bays. You know, if they're going out on the Settlers Way, that looks pretty easy. But if they're coming back around to go back out on Highway 6 on that driveway 3, then, you know, maybe they're running again, they could be running up against other traffic that's queued up. So again, it may be more of a consideration for the business and just the convenience of the customers, but I was just kind of curious if anyone has any insight about how that would work.
So generally, in some of our sites that get really busy at certain times, they assign 1 to 2 techs to control the flow of traffic. So one would be on the back side of the building, one would be on the front side of the building, and just kind of directing the patrons as they come and go, how to leave the premises and create less of confusion on which way should I leave, that type of thing.
Okay. A couple other questions probably for you. So there's no, since the customers wait in the car, there's no inside waiting area?
There is. So we do inspections, but it usually takes about 6 to 8 months to actually get the permit to do the vehicle inspections. But that's the only time a patron would come out of their vehicle is when we're doing an inspection, and there is a small size of a closet customer service area. There's 2 seats in there. It's air conditioned. But if somebody wanted to come out during the oil change, they could, but the likelihood of that happening is very rare because of the speed of the oil change that we perform.
Okay. And can you tell us a little bit more about the environmentally friendly disposal method?
Yeah, so we have state contracts with companies that take the recycled oil. It's on a per demand contract, so if in a busier location they may be emptying the tanks twice a week or once a week, but it's usually a corporate account that we use, but we've done our research for somebody environment friendly, taking the oil and recycling it correctly.
So there's a tank on the premise?
There's 3 above ground tanks in the equipment room, and within the 3 pits, that gets vacuumed into the 3 holding tanks, and then we have gauges that tells us that this tank's almost that full, and then the vendor will come and remove the oil, the used oil from the tanks.
Okay, great. Thanks very much.
Sure thing.
AP, Taylor?
There hadn't been any mention of signs on any of the streets. Is that a part of the CUP process? Separate? Got it. And then next question is on the median that exists in Settlers Way at the moment. at no point in the future would we have left turn access, either a curb cut or, I know some of those esplanades are coming out at some of the intersections, allow for more turns, lanes. A cut there just doesn't seem like a good idea.
Yeah,
So,
Guillermo, senior engineer,
Now
Manny.
you got it.
yeah, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, if you're talking about open,
that up.
right here, no, it's the distance doesn't allow that.
Great, thank you, I just wanted to be sure that was the case. Sure.
Thank you. Jay, do you have any?
I have to assume that there's shared access agreements in place.
Yes, there have been for several decades. When this was first developed, there was an existing cross-access and parking access agreement, and that still is in existence, and yes.
Since the north one is revised, can I ask that if there's been a revised access agreement?
What do you mean?
The north access is being revised, they're moving the...
No, it's in and out still.
No, you're taking the tree out and moving it down.
Oh,
That's
just
your
the...
thing.
Can we get the shared access either put on the site plan or maybe a survey provided that shows that, so that we include the whole area of the new
So
access to the north?
the access agreement is, just provides access and says that every person in the lot can use all of the area, so.
Typically though, they're describing the meets and bounds, and they.
And
cover a
so what it
specific area.
describes is it includes all of this giant area here. It's not just this little square.
No,
I'm not
she's asking a different question than you're answering.
Okay.
So my question is, particularly in the north access, they've changed the entrance.
Yes, it's moving over about a foot.
And so my question, has the access agreement description been revised to reflect that change?
It does not need to be revised to reflect that change.
Okay, so
It's not mentioned, this specific driveway is not mentioned. They don't have specific driveways mentioned. It's access to the entire site is allowed for the entire site. There aren't specific driveways mentioned. Yes, it's a blanket agreement for the entire
But I
location.
think what Jay, where you're headed, or what, at least I think, this drawing needs to be adjusted.
Well, the drawing is adjusted,
No, it's
isn't
not.
it? They've changed the...
I don't know where they're moving it that way, because they're taking out a tree. And this is where that area
Okay,
is.
so here, right here is where the curb currently exists. This is one side and this is the other, and they are adjusting it to right here,
Well,
in black.
if you're going to adjust it, don't show me, I don't care where it's at now. This drawing needs to reflect where it's going to be, and that's what we're approving.
Right, it says both of them. In gray
I
is
don't need
where...
both of them. You're
Okay.
confusing the issue when you show both of them. Okay?
Okay,
Because what we're approving is what you're going to put on the ground, in my opinion. Right?
Just so there's no confusion, because especially if you refer back to the exhibits and tie it to there, so there's no confusion. But I want to go back to Jay's question and say, even though it's a general blanket access agreement, do you still feel that it's appropriate to include the meets and bounds or the access agreement on the plat?
Well, I think at least as a minimum, a note needs to be included to state that with this revision, the shared access, we're good with the shared access with this revision.
That it's covered under?
Yes, yes. Oftentimes, they're just talking about meets and bounds, and if so, we could have an encroachment there that,
But Jay, you got the same problem in reverse on Highway 6. They're tearing out an access it was there. And it doesn't reflect anything here.
yeah, but there wouldn't be a shared access agreement for that
Right.
entrance.
Yeah, but it's still, I don't know, it's sort of,
Again, I'm just concerned that we
yes, and
address the access.
I'll do a
to the
little
north.
bit more research and then make a note on the site plan and make sure that it is the shared access agreement does cover this change in the driveway.
And that it's noted on...
It'll be noted in in one of the exhibits, yes.
Anything? Taylor, go ahead.
Forgive me, I forgot to ask one question about the signs. Can you go back to the first slide of the gentleman's presentation? Are those, the signs there, the 3 on the bays, are those permitted by the city, or do
They are permitted by the city, and there's very strict limits on banner and wind device signs.
Good to know. Thank you.
So just just to tag on to Taylor's question, I have as a note here, does this photo meet our requirements?
I am not sure. I would, the banners, I do not believe so, and the rest of the signage at the top, I would have to have very specific measurements. We have a 15% maximum, but that's done through completely separate permits.
Well, along those lines.
Can I ask, Madam Chair, have you, in the past, has the commission put conditions on the CUP related to something like signage?
Well, generally, what we've done in the past is we've tried to be very consistent.
Yeah.
We don't want to give one applicant an advantage over another one. So in the past, historically, we have tried to be very consistent with what we allow, and we try to pretty much stick to the city's sign regulations. There are a few exceptions where they've been negotiated, like in Imperial and different places, but for the most part, along major roadways, but for the most part, we try to be very consistent.
The consistency comes from the deference to the city's overall signage policy, right? Yep.
Exactly.
That sounds
Well,
good.
but if you look at the exterior elevations they've got on there, they've got signage locations noted. So that means that they can go there. Now, my understanding is they will have to they still have to, the signs have to comply with the city's sign ordinances.
Yes, and that...
So that's just where they can go.
Yes, so this is where they...
They'll have to come back through a process
Through a
with the
completely
city.
separate permit process to meet all of the city's development code.
Okay?
Yes.
So what you're seeing, was we're over there, just wipe that off.
As long as there's still an ability for the city to have some input on
Part of the code.
Yes.
So there's a code in place? So
Yes,
that
Chapter 4 of the
satisfies
Development
my
Code covers all of the signs.
All they're saying here is, this is where we want to put the signs. Now they'll have to bring that sign, correct me if I'm wrong, somebody.
No, you're
Bring that
100%
sign in and get it approved in those locations.
Correct.
Is that,
Right.
So,
okay?
as it stands right now, so that Take 5 can, did you see that very first one right underneath the black tower, the black one, that's gone, and then the banners are gone. So really all you're going to see as far as signage from this elevation, you'll see fastest oil change on the planet.
Sharon?
So you're not going to have a Take 5 sign anywhere on the property?
No, okay, so this right here, this little Take 5 oil can and these words would be what would potentially go here and here in the future, potentially. But again, that would have to meet all of the development code requirements and maximums, as well as all of the building and safety codes.
But I still, excuse me, Taylor, you're saying you're not going to even advertise Take 5?
No, we will on the monument sign.
Well, we don't see a monument sign on this drawing.
Monument signs are not...
They have been in the past.
No, PDs might be what you're thinking about. PDs normally do address sign regulations, monument wall, and all kinds of maximums. CUPs have not historically addressed signage at all. Monument, location, or
Well, just
wall signs.
for the benefit of anyone who might be watching this that isn't here presently and saw that photo, just so you know that whatever signage ultimately ends there will have to meet the city code. Yes, that's the bottom line. So, if you're going to speak, come up to the microphone so that we can capture what you're
Apologies.
saying.
But our intent was just to give the members just a view of what to expect on the look of the building. The signage is a different entity.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, Jay or Taylor, did either one of y'all have any other questions?
Good, thank you.
Okay, Carl, go ahead.
All right, on your exhibit, the C1,
Yes,
drawing
exactly.
number? First of all, they got here, they just list 10-foot water line easement, sanitary sewer easements, 10-foot wide, there's nothing, if they're going to call them out, they need to put them on the drawing where they're at, not just tell me they're, it needs to be on there.
Okay.
And I assume this reserve was platted, it's a platted reserve.
Correct.
With the road, okay. And we're going to move that. And you mentioned this directional, you got arrows here, that's fine, but you mentioned directional signs.
Yes.
Shouldn't they be placed on this drawing, and the location and how that's going to look, or something?
Not necessarily.
Or is that part of the sign ordinance?
It's part of the sign ordinance. Directional signs are, yes, it's part of the sign ordinance. It's all covered in our Sugar Land Development Code. Directional monument, wall sign, it's all covered
Well,
in
but
that.
in this situation, I don't, it's got some questions about QN and all of that from just this drawing. I think we might want to, well, we can't see it. Another thing down here in the bottom, at the where it's under benchmark down there, it says, according to the Federal Emergency Management Agency's flood insurance rate map for Harris County, Texas, and incorporated Harris Community Panel, da-da-da-da-da. I don't think we're in Harris County.
There you go. Yes, sir.
So I don't know who did this, but he needs, if he doesn't know where he's at, I would find me somebody else.
I wanted to touch upon Commissioner Stevens on the directional signage, because I was thinking back, we don't have a ton of automotive-related things, but I was thinking back to some things like one of the dealerships and a few other elements where what I think your condition ended up being was that directional signage for queuing be placed at the site. It wasn't about the exact spots, but it was that you were saying, since a person doesn't normally have to put any in, and I think that would be I think it's a good point, and I think what that says is we expect that signage will be inside that site to direct people. So at minimum, I think...
You think we should put some on
I
it?
think that kind of refined element, and we can work with the applicant a little more, but I was trying to think back on how some of that's gone in some past, whether it's been a CUP or PD, so that the expectation is, yes, there will be directional signage
Nothing
inside
that I
that
see in the CUP that says they're going to do that.
Right, that's what I'm thinking too. So I think Laura can work
You'll
with
work
that.
on that before it gets back here, Doug.
Right.
Well, the last I remember was Mercedes and coming out of the Mercedes dealership.
Yeah.
Wasn't that the last time?
Well,
We were very specific about locations, I agree.
And, okay, on this queuing and circulation, they got some 15-foot wide, what are they? Again, they got a 10-foot wide, and it says BC mud. There ain't no BC, there's a Fort Bend County mud. People's done this stuff, need to know what they're doing and put it down here. They're going to list it on here. You see what I'm talking about?
Yes, here, where it says,
Huh?
down here?
Is that is that this same drawing? Yeah. Yeah, if you read that, you can't read it like on the bill, but you can read it on the bill. It says 10-foot wide BC mud number 16, sanitary sewer easement.
Because it looks like the F was left off.
Huh?
It looks like the F was left off.
Yeah, it was. It doesn't look like it, it was.
There's a period there, it's a period B.
Don't get me any. If you're going to do it right or don't do it. On the, they talk about there's a waiting area and a restroom, but I don't see a drawing.
Right, there's not a floor plan included.
Huh?
There is not a floor plan currently included, but it would be,
They should have put it on this one. This is the closest thing they come to. This doesn't show where They say there's a restroom, but it doesn't show a restroom. And they don't show a waiting area. Well, if you call it out, show it. If you know, how do we know you got, we may not approve it if you don't do that. In other words, there's no detailed layout of the floor plan. And I guess somebody smarter than me got to figure out this lighting exhibit. I assume that's what that is, right there?
Yes, that's the photometric.
Does it work? Huh? All right. That's all I have.
That's all you have? It's pretty good, actually. So, okay, well, did you capture all those comments? Do you need a recap?
I'm just going to review and make sure I have everything. We were looking for adding a note and doing some more research into the access agreement with Market First Colony, adjusting the, showing where the old driveway is and making sure that that's only showing the new one. Adjusting some of the notes and arrows that are showing where some of the easements are around the property lines, adding more detail for the floor plan, calling out where the waiting room and restroom will be, as well as looking into the directional signage, seeing what the Mercedes CUP looked like, and possibly adding that to the site as well.
Okay. Anybody, was anything missed that you all wanted addressed? Okay. I think we're good. Thank you. We will move on to item B, public hearing. Receive and hear all persons desiring to be heard on a proposed rezoning of approximately 0.7906 acres from Business Office BO District to Plan Development PD District Final Development Plan, Lake Pointe Creek Bend Live Work Townhomes. Commissioner Watley.
Madam Chair, I filed an affidavit with the city, and I'm recusing myself from this item until later. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And Lauren.
Thank you. I will start with just orienting us to where we're talking about this evening, Lake Pointe Town Center. So on the left is the most recently approved general land plan. Our area tonight circled in black for residential PD here, the 0.79 acres. And then on the right, an aerial with circled in red the site here. So we've got Lake Pointe Parkway running north-south, and then Creek Bend Drive east-west here, and we're at the southeast corner. So proposed PD this evening, 0.79 acres at the southeast corner of Lake Pointe Parkway and Creek Bend Drive. The proposals for 9 single-family live-work townhome units with the non-residential component, the work component, not being technically a required element for the development. These will be single-family townhomes in alignment with the general land plan. However, the non-residential component does have a use list associated with it, with a set small list of some compatible uses with the surrounding single-family residential, very low impact, not what you think of typical retail services or restaurant, just very focused on your professional office, so your attorney or your realtor or your CPA, those kind of professional offices. Property is currently zoned as business office, so rezoning to the PD final development plan for the single-family residential, again, would be in alignment with the recently approved Lake Pointe general land plan. So I'll take you through the proposed overall site layout. We're on Creek Bend Drive and Lake Pointe Parkway. So these, this is the layout of the 9 townhome units facing Lake Pointe Parkway. So your only access to the homes vehicularly would be from the private access drive into the rear, into the shared common driveway. There is no access from Creek Bend Drive here. So your only access comes here. You pull in, these are 2 garage spaces for each townhome unit, and a few guest parking spaces over here on the landscape reserve. some spaces existing on Lake Pointe Parkway. And then you can see you've got some access from either Lake Pointe Parkway or from the rear into your home. It was designed around this existing electrical easement. That is there. That will remain. So it's obviously impacted a little bit on how they were able to design the site. Touch on the landscape pedestrian. There's existing sidewalk along Lake Pointe Parkway, so they would be constructing additional public sidewalking along Creek Bend Drive and the access drive. The blue color is more of a sidewalk for pedestrian access from Lake Pointe Parkway, either back into the unit as the homeowner, or if you were visiting an office there, should one exist. There is some existing landscaping in the Reserve B, as well as street trees along Lake Pointe Parkway, and they will be proposing to add some additional landscaping as well. The elevations, showed up a little small here, apologies, but I know you all have it in your material. So it's these are pretty specific. They walk through the overall height. They lay out some of the floor plan heights, the building materials, primarily the white is the stucco, some brick masonry. You can see the each side of the unit, which is helpful. The rear with the garages, the front with your windows and your balconies, and some fencing details. So this is very a detailed elevation for what we can expect to see on the ground. A few photographs I just took just in case haven't been on Lake Pointe Parkway recently. So this is at the corner of Creek Bend and Lake Pointe looking south, south along Lake Pointe Parkway. These two photos would be standing sort of at the corner but farther south, just looking back at the open lot, and then it's a lot of medical office surrounding it in the rear. Excerpt just from our future land use plan map. The Lake Pointe is classified as one of the 6 regional activity centers, so this residential component would fill some infill development, one of the last really infill developments here in the Lake Pointe area. So a few initial points to consider before we move into public hearing and discussion. We are looking for your feedback this evening on the proposed exhibits, including the elevations. PDs, as you know, this is how it will be constructed with whatever the final exhibits are, so looking for feedback on that. The use list, as I mentioned, it is tailored to this kind of specific development surrounded by other single-family residential. It does mirror the use list for the existing live-work townhomes that are located farther south along Lake Pointe Parkway, so it really is the exact same use list, so you can expect some of the same work elements should they choose to locate there. We did get a traffic worksheet submitted with the final development plan. It was reviewed by staff. Lake Pointe Parkway is classified as a major collector street, so it is set up for heavy traffic, to be a heavily trafficked road. But the traffic worksheet did not generate enough significant traffic impact to the area. And again, its proposed PD is in alignment with the current amended general land plan that the Commission took action on in August and the Council approved subsequent to that. And this proposed use as single-family townhomes actually was initially authorized in 2005 through the original Lake Pointe PD ordinance until it was rezoned in 2011 to the business office. So this is taking it back to how it was originally zoned in the original Lake Pointe PD. So public hearing notice is sent to property owners, to the HOA. We've got it published, and we had 3 inquiries. We had 2 calls and an email. They were informational, and they did not express any opposition at that time. So we would recommend to go ahead and hold the public hearing, followed by our discussion and direction with consideration and action to occur at a subsequent meeting. And that concludes my presentation. The applicant doesn't have a formal presentation, but I would like to invite Les Newton with Planned Community Developers up to say a few words.
Good evening, Commissioners. Don
Jansen submitted this originally, and he wanted me to mention a few of the items he put in his letter with the application. Obviously, we have a hard time making up our mind because we started with this in 2005. This was really the north end. The residential development proceeded naturally from the south end. In 2011, Don had a proposal from a medical office user for a professional building. We still felt like this tract would be several years away for residential development, so we came in and we requested BO zoning, which was granted. Unfortunately, the contract fell through, and we have, for the last 8 or 9 years, continued to market that as a professional office site. The bifurcation of the site by the power easement, even though it's underground, does cause some challenges with site planning between a parking lot and an office building. So we just have not succeeded in drawing professional office. So we're actually very excited because the residential market is in very good shape there. We started with live-work townhomes on the south end. We know there's some concerns, always concerns about parking. They've had some challenges, but we've learned a lot from that initial development. I look back at our plat on that this afternoon, and for 20 live-work townhomes, there were actually 14 on-street parking spaces. And internal to the site, there were no dedicated guest spaces. So we kind of set ourselves up for a parking challenge in that first development, and certainly we've learned from that. This, you have 9 live-work, you have 7 on-street parking spaces, you have 3 internal dedicated guest spaces, so there are 10 in total for 9 townhomes. And we are working with the builder actually this afternoon, starting to look at where, in working with staff, perhaps we can add as many as 4 additional spaces, 2 on Lake Pointe Parkway and 1 on the outbound side of the access road. So we think we're going to be in much better shape relative to parking, which is, we know, I spoke to Rod Craig this afternoon. They've probably spent hours on the phone with Rod Craig and talking about potential parking solutions for the southern live works. We think we can address it in these, so we look forward to your questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. I will now open the public hearing, and I have 2 speakers who have signed up to speak. First is Don Tassin. If you would, just start with your name and address, and then you'll have 3 minutes.
Okay. Thank you. My name is Donald Tassam, and I live at 1122 Lake Pointe Parkway. I do not personally have any opposition to the rezoning from business to residential. My problem comes with the live-work arrangement in the residential units. Depends a lot on what work we're talking about. And they've said that it'll be professional, yet in the documents in Exhibit B3, they talk about retail stores, a photography studio, tailoring, and watch, clock, and jewelry repair. To me, those are types of businesses that would draw multiple customers a day, and there are definitely not enough parking spots. He already mentioned the parking problem in the other live-work areas, and they're just designing this pretty much the same as the other ones. When I look at the numbers, they say that up to 1,500 square feet per unit could be dedicated to non-live or essentially work areas, and 9 units, that's a total of 13,500 square feet. And it says that you're supposed to have 1.5 parking space for each 1,000 square foot, so that calculates out to 20 plus parking spaces. And even if he increases it to 14, he's still well below the 20 needed, according to the requirements. That's my main concern, is the type of business and the parking spaces that's needed and the parking spaces that are existing. I appreciate the notification we got. I understand there was a previous meeting to this meeting, and we did not get any notification whatsoever for that. And yes, maybe I should be checking the Planning and Zoning Commission website regularly, but I don't, and, that's probably why I missed the first meeting. But the notification to me has been somewhat deficient. And one last request is that when they do start construction, appreciate they don't start too early in the morning and end too late at night, because I do live right across the street. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, I have Suzanne Watley. And just start, if you would, by stating your name and your address.
Thank you. Suzanne Watley, 1106 Lake Point Parkway, and I'm here tonight as a resident. First of all, I'm in favor of the townhouses. I think that in lieu of businesses across the street from where I look out every day, townhouses would be much better. But I think it completes the aesthetic of the street as it was intended to be a unique living area, very different from any part of the other parts of the city. So I want to continue that effort to put townhouses there. But with that in mind, I like to make the following comments. Please consider a design that is not trendy, because 10 to 15 years from now, if they don't sell, we lose home property values. And some of us are there for the long haul, and we need to make sure that whatever you consider as far as the outside structure is going to be sellable in 10 to 15 years. We want to make sure it's harmonious with the existing homes adjacent to the property so it does not lend itself to be too contrasting. All the homes on that street are different and unique for each subdivision, but they all look harmonious. We want to keep that a part of the neighborhood. The traffic issue is an issue. I know there's a TIA for Creek Bend and Lake Point Parkway. I don't know the status of it at this point, but there have been multiple wrecks I've witnessed and seen, and having parking along that way with live work, I know that people parallel parking in that area during traffic hours to come to a place that there is work is going to be a problem. There already is. Those parking spots cannot be considered as a part of this build because they are already used by public people coming there on weekends, and they use those spots to park for access to the boathouse and to the public areas. So I don't say they can't use them for guests like we do, but we are not considered using those parts and those spots in front of our homes as our parking spots. Those are guest spots, and they are public. So if they're not deemed public, I think that we're shooting ourselves in the foot for traffic control. And thirdly, I would like the developer to get together with our neighborhood and the neighborhoods adjoining it to have an open meeting about what's going on so we understand it. I like to work with him to make it prosperous for all of us. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else? Go ahead, sir, if you would come forward.
I didn't know there was a sign in.
Don't worry, when you're done, if you would start by just stating your name and address, and when you're done, we'll have you sit down here at the dais and fill it out for us.
My name is Yagnish Patel. I own the building 1211 Lake Point Parkway, and it's a dental office with a vision office next to it. My concern would be that with the residential building there, what is to stop anyone from using our parking spots? We don't have a gate. There's not, it's an open space. We have parking right along the street. I mean, not along the street, but as you turn in, after their property is finished, our parking, everything starts. So what would stop, anybody from using our space for their personal use? And I mean, we can't just sit there and say, oh, well, whose car is this? And try to find out, who it belongs to, especially in the evenings. From what I see here, I mean, it is very limited space as far as if somebody is having a get-together. 3 parking spots in the back, it does not, I mean, what's going to happen is it's going to overflow into our building. And I can't put a gate there. I mean, because that's a street, that's, it's a throughway street that ties Lake Point to Creek Bend, or Creekway, or whatever, that other street on the other side. So I am opposed to this converting to residential. It was meant for, set up as a business So I would like to oppose the residential.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on this? Okay. Again, if you would just start by stating your name and address and then fill out a speaker form when you're done for us.
Yes, I'm Brad Watley. I live at 1106 Lake Point Parkway, and I think just adding to what I've heard already, we read on the website that there were discussions with the homeowners associations on Lake Point Parkway about this project. Nobody contacted our homeowners association. The president of our homeowners association is here tonight. She can vouch for that. So we don't understand if there was all this community effort, why we were included when we lived right across the street. So I'd just like to leave with that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Just to add, I mean, I did not, this was the first...
I'm sorry, your 3 minutes your time is up. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on this? Come on forward. That's okay. So if you would, again, just start with your name and address and then fill out a form when you're done for us.
My name is Terry Snook. I own Advanced Hearing Center. I'm at 1223 Lake Point. And my concern is visibility because we're not visible from the street. And we have our business sign on Lake Point right in the area that's being rezoned. Now, I have talked to Don. He's reassured me that we're going to move the sign and it's going to be okay. But that's my main concern, is to make sure that we're still visible.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Fill out a form.
Thank you. Anyone else? Sure, go ahead. Once again, just if you would start with your name and address, and I'll have you also please fill out a form when you're done
Absolutely.
speaking.
My name is Viral Desai. I'm actually the optometrist at that 1211 building that Yagnish Patel just mentioned. I totally oppose the residential just because when we look out from our building, you'll see a 50-foot building that just blocks the way. And also for traffic, when the patients are trying to find our office, they have a harder time looking into it if they just see a residential right in front of it. The reason we put that building there because it was allocated as a business office zoning itself. And lastly, when we questioned or emailed Don 2 years ago about asking to purchase that land, we never got a reply back. So I don't know if this purchase has already been done by this gentleman here for residentials. And before it went to purchase as a residential property or is converting into a residential zoning, which we would have been notified beforehand. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, seeing no one, I will close the public hearing, and we will move on to review of and discussion on proposed rezoning of approximately 0.7906 acres from Business Office BO District to Planned Development PD District Final Development Plan, Lake Point Creek Bend Live Work Townhomes. Does anyone have any questions for Lauren or the applicant? Let me start on this side. AP.
A couple of minor things, more curiosities. On the parking spots that were shown directly in front of the buildings, are those reserved, like 2 per business or 2 per work business office, or are they open to anybody who's in that?
So Lake Point Parkway is street parking, so it's public on-street parking. Yeah.
And what signage, if any, is there going to be to show that these are businesses, or is it...
on the buildings?
Yeah, or even like adjacent or in one of the reserves or any other adjacent locations.
So the only signage allowed, and it's written in section, if I can guide you to it, I of Exhibit B, freestanding signs are prohibited, so it's just signage that could be very small on the building, like the ones directly in the south, similar to how they have signage.
Okay, that was it for now.
Okay, Taylor?
So I'm curious about the parking situation, but I think I'll leave that to others for us to discuss as we move along here. What I wanted to do is ask Lauren if you could expand or maybe respond directly to Mr. Tassin's question about the permitted uses on the that are proposed for these sites.
So, yeah, I'm taking a look at Exhibit B3. I think we classifying them as low impact meant that It's not several people in there at one time. You know, you come into a tailor and you drop off your pants and then you leave and you come back and pick them up. So that's the idea behind these uses. And the photography studio, you're there, there's not everybody in there getting their picture taken at the same time. You know, you leave, you come back. So we likened the impact to professional office as in you come, you do your business, and then you leave. Not as you would see in a typical, you know, retail store, clothing store, restaurant, where it's a continuous cycle of several people there. That's how we looked at it, you know. But again, it's up to the commission. If you all want to make some changes, if you want to modify it, the desire by the applicant was just to take the use list that was used in the original live-work townhomes, copy that here. But again, if feedback from the commission is that they want to limit it further, that's the discussion that we can have.
I would encourage staff to try to put a more concrete definition on intensity, and not use just a perceived use, but maybe point to something that indicates, because what you're describing, Lauren, is logical, but you know, what if there's, you know, 3 customers at the tailor at one time, right? You know,
yeah.
So putting some definition around intensity, I think, is called for in this circumstance.
Yeah, and I think I would, yes, I agree, but I may guide you all to tell us if you want to just get rid of them, because it's difficult to write that into a zoning document, you know what I mean?
Okay.
So it may just be if they're not appropriate, then we take them out. But, yeah.
Let me, if it's okay with you, Madam Chair, let's, can we just, let me study that part, and then reserve the right to come back.
Sorry, I turned my speaker off. Absolutely. I mean, one of the ways that I think you could maybe limit intensity would be to say photography or tailoring or whatever by appointment, so that people call and make appointments and you don't have 3 or 4 people show up at once for tailoring and wait in line, or that might be one consideration. I mean, I understand what you're saying, and looking over this list, it seems pretty limited, and it seems like it's appropriate to me as far as not high intensity uses, but I see what you're saying. You might have 2 or 3 people if, just pick up something at Macy's or something and decide they need some tailoring, and run over there. So maybe if it was by appointment, so that you would kind of slot people in rather than having a bunch show up at once. Jay, do you have any questions or comments?
Parking is definitely a concern. Any live work or any businesses in that area. I'm also concerned with the 3 visitor parking at the far north end. There's not much turnaround space. I know this is preliminary, but that's all I have. Just a concern about the parking.
Okay, go over here and ask Andy if you have any comments or questions.
Thank you, ma'am. Lauren, I got just a couple. I'm trying to wrap my head around the history of this. It was originally zoned for this area as residential, but not live work. Is that correct?
That's correct. It was single-family townhome. The live work in the original 05 PD was for the 20 that you see existing now.
Okay. And so then it was changed to business, to BO.
In 2011.
Okay. And now we're looking to change it not to residential. We're not going back to the original. We're going to this live-work concept.
Yes and no. So it is still single-family residential because someone can live in this townhome without the work component. The work component is an option if they choose to exercise the ability to use the first floor area as their in-home office.
All right. And I apologize about this next question because I was meant to look it up and I forgot. Last meeting, we discussed a whole bunch of stuff around the activity centers. I had stuck in my head somewhere about sidewalk widths and pedestrian flows and things like that. And I seem to recall that open space and that pedestrian flow space was much wider than 6 foot.
That's correct. This site is a little more challenging because it's an infill development and it's really surrounded by built-out environment. So your sidewalks are already there, your streets are already there, so this is one of those. I know last week we did talk about infill development and redevelopment and how there could be sites that maybe don't pick up every piece of what a regional activity center would want and maybe only pick up a few things. So I think that's some of the conversation we had last week, some of the challenges that we're seeing, but this is definitely one of those infill sites.
And we talked about that as well.
Yeah.
And then I guess just a couple others. I know that the existing street does all parallel parking. And so I guess one of my questions is, knowing that parking is such a concern, was there not a consideration of doing diagonal parking, head-in diagonal parking, to potentially gain more parking spaces? Is that even something that could be done on Lake Pointe Parkway?
It's not really set up for that. When Lake Pointe Parkway went in, when that was in 2006, so long ago, all those spaces were put in parallel at that time. It was really designed to have the parallel parking spaces and not a head in and a head out, just due to maneuvering.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else?
No, that was it. Thanks, Lauren. I really appreciate it.
Okay, Matt?
Just a few questions, go from easiest to hardest maybe. So obviously parking is a concern. For my benefit, it would be helpful at an appropriate time to kind of understand what goes into the study that's conducted to determine, what things are looked at and what things are considered. And to Taylor's comment, regarding the intensity of the operation, I just think it would be helpful for us to have a clearer understanding of what city staff does to evaluate the proposal and to address those issues just at a broad level.
So you mean like what is looked at in a traffic worksheet when that comes in?
Exactly. And secondly, and this may just be for me, but going back to there was a comment and you addressed a question about Exhibit 3. I think it would be helpful to understand what the permissible uses are under the current zoning of BO compared to what the allowable non-residential uses would be in the PD, just to get a sense of what could go in now and whether or not what's being proposed is really radically different than that or
I can tell you it would be any medical office, any other type of office building, most services, a lot of services, not as many as the B2 district, but I think some of your biggest traffic generator is the medical office. I know we park that at a higher ratio than regular office due to how much traffic that generates, and that could certainly go here with the business office zoning by right.
Okay, so would it be fair to say that under the proposed PD, the actual permissible uses of the property would be there'd be fewer permissible uses than there would be under
and that goes
zoning?
into some of the study that traffic staff does with the worksheet, with the traffic worksheet. They have to list out the uses, and they use their traffic manuals and determine what the counts are for those type of uses. That's part of the study, but I won't go into more. I won't overspeak, but I'll get more information on that.
Last question for the applicant. I just want to know, did someone from the development company go to the homeowner HOA meeting or not? Because the letter from the applicant that's in our materials seems to reference that they attended an HOA meeting, and I'm hearing that maybe didn't happen. So I'd like some clarity on that.
Les, would you answer at the days?
Again, this is Don's fault. There's more than one HOA. I believe he met with the Townhome Association, and I can't tell you, I believe all the townhomes are in one association, and then the urban homes are a separate association, and we'll certainly be happy to go meet with them as well. We'll accept that as an oversight on our part.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had at this time.
Go right ahead, Andy.
Lauren, one of the things that I think that we need to see going forward on this, and Citizen Watley brought this up, is that when we talked, especially even last week, about these activity centers, is that they need to flow. They need to feel like they all fit together. And I know we have one drawing in here that shows this piece in the whole, but I think seeing more along the lines of how this fits with the rest of them, not just this diagram, but this diagram with the surround, helps make sure that we address that it does stay harmonious and as a congruent activity center.
Okay. You bet. I would just echo some of the same concerns. In fact, even before any of this was developed, I said I foresee parking's going to be an issue. Just even having, Christmas at your house or Thanksgiving and having family and friends over, one or two houses could create a problem with parking over there. So I can certainly empathize, especially with the other businesses, and wondering, okay, are they going to be coming in and parking in my lot? So I think that we've got to come up with some way to address that. Overall, I have no objections. I think this is lower impact use than what would be allowed in the BO, and I think that there are some ways to limit the intensity. Like I said, we can explore some of those, but I think the list of uses is appropriate, but traffic, I think, and the parking needs to be addressed. I'd be interested to know about the accidents and the TIAs that have been done over there that
Yeah, so it's a traffic study that staff is currently doing on Creek Bend Drive as it relates to some of this parking. So it's not a full-blown TA, it's more of just a kind of a study of the area that they're going through right now.
Okay. And just the information that you might have on accidents that have taken place over there. But I can understand the concern about parking, especially by the adjacent property owners that have set aside parking for their customers and their clients, and having that encroached on by people stopping into these businesses when they can't find any other parking. Okay, I will turn it over to Carl.
My first question, one of the gentlemen that spoke, and I'm looking at the right, I guess page 3 of whatever this is, the parking regulations, and he talked about it said applicable times, and also provide 1.5 spaces for each 1,000 square feet of non-residential use. So if we got 9 townhouses, and they can, if they all did work, and I think there's somewhere in here there's 1,500 square feet they can utilize, then that's, as he pointed out, 13,500 square feet. So does that mean 13.5 parking spaces? It's got to be provided? Because it's not all of them can, or all of them, none of them have to. But if you're going to build it, and you're saying that, then you've got to figure out how to provide that. And with all due respect, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 3 of these spaces, if I'm understanding all these drawings, which is questionable sometimes, that back, first of all, there's a public access there, and then it looks like that it's gated going behind the townhouses. So that means 3 of these spaces don't automatically, how are they going to get there if they're guests or trying to find you can't count those against those 3,
Yeah,
it just doesn't pencil out.
No, it doesn't, and actually, we discussed this earlier in the week. I'd like to just quickly offer some solutions because, again, a lot of this we just carried forward from what we did down south. There's never been a retail business. There's never been a photography studio. There's never been a dry cleaners. There's never been a watch repair shop. The builder is willing to take everything except professional office off the list because that's what they've been used for. I'd be interested by the next time we come back, we should go count how many of the 20 actually have businesses in them. It's just an option that is attractive to a very small part of the buyers. Further to the parking issue, you're absolutely right. The math doesn't work, okay? There's only 650 square feet on the ground floor, and about 100 of that square feet is in stairwell. So they're comfortable. I've just asked the architect and the builder, are we okay changing the 1,500 to 550? Then the math works. And then if we come back and we're able to add these 4 spaces that we hope to talk to staff about, we'll be over on that ratio. So those are things that are very easy for us to change.
But the thing, what we got to go by is what was written down here.
No, I understand. I'm just
But
saying
that can change, and so let me suggest, if they're willing to take everything but professional offices off and go down, that's a great starting place, and I think if you would get with some of the homeowners associations that missed out and kind of, I think maybe this can be worked out for the most part. I think there's a little work before it comes back before us for consideration and action.
And you're going to have to be small work.
Yeah.
It's more work, I know, I'm sorry.
But I mean, you talked about just 1,500 square feet. They're willing, we're going to have to get very specific, 500 square feet or whatever.
Yes,
I mean, if you're going to push, if you want to push this change.
Yes, we do.
I mean, it's all got to come together.
It makes sense, and it's really, the 1,500 was just, again, carrying forward from what we did, and I assure you, none of the other live works have 1,500 square feet of business space in them.
Right.
Well, and I think your thought of at least getting some information on the existing ones gives us some kind of benchmark, so to speak, number one. But you always got to, if you plan, and you got to do it as if all 9 of these are going to go that way.
I completely agree.
The whole 550 feet.
Say, well, we guess there's going to be 5, and we only need 6 parking spaces, and then we all 9 do, and we needed 16.
We'll test on that, but I think 550 gets us there. I calculated that with the existing parking, we could support 5,300 square feet.
I'm not going to sit here and doodle on it that much. The other, I had some other here. Let me get back to my, that one got me stumbled. Somewhere here, these building finishes, they got on page 2, it's like building siding, masonry, stucco, metal. My question is, how does this fit with the new legislation?
Yep, I can address that.
Or whoever?
Yeah, so our interpretation is that PDs can still have, the way the bill read was if it's of an architectural, cultural, or something else significance, then you can still regulate building finishes. So our legal staff and our management staff has, that's the way we're using the bill, is where we say that our PDs and our architecturally significant areas, and therefore we can assert building finishes.
Well, and this may be broad, my comment is this may be broad enough. It's not, I read that, I think that bill is meant to be, you use Acme brick or you use something. I mean, masonry and steel and whatever was in here. I mean, that's just building materials type, so that's, I think that,
And I wish that you were the one who got to decide that, because it would make our lives so much easier, but we need to, you're right, we need to try to figure out what they intend and go by it, but.
And the other thing, this belt plane rule, refresh my memory on what is that that says the development code does not apply
So
within the PD?
that we were going to suggest to remove. It was because it applies when you have commercial with residential, so it doesn't really. Yeah, right. It's the plane that you have to be set back for a certain.
Oh, okay.
An extra foot for every.
Yeah, I know, don't have.
You've seen it.
We haven't seen one in a while.
It's been a while.
About it. Let me run through my. Is this got here public, I don't know what, they're not labeled. They're Exhibit B5. They're labeled, I guess, public vehicular access. Is that really a public street? Or what is that? At the end there by the Townhouse 1?
So it's not a public city street. It's a.
Then it's not public vehicular access then?
It's a private access drive that PCD set up to circulate from Creekway down to Lake Pointe.
Well, I'm just reading.
I gotcha.
It says public. And I guess, back to these 3 spaces you got back here behind the gates, how do they ever get used if it's for guests? I mean, how are they going to get in there?
To the spaces.
Well, just with...
Unless, up at the microphone, sorry.
Same as the existing townhomes, people do invite guests, they tell them the code to the gate, and they come in. And so I think they can be used from the gate. I agree with your point, they're not relevant to
I don't know that you can count those for,
Yeah, but I do think it'll be useful for guests.
Well, but we're talking live work now, so if you're trying to count those, I can't count those.
I think we will be able to
understand
park the live work outside of the gate.
Yeah.
So any other questions? Go ahead, Taylor.
Just real quick, Mr. Newton, do you anticipate, will all 9 definitely be live work? Or is it an option for the buyer?
They'll have that, because that's the zoning, they'll have that option, and we will park it as though all of them will. But I think that, my guess is that fewer than 50% of the ones in the south, maybe even fewer than 25%, actually became live work. And I don't know for sure, I want to go find out.
But somewhere it's going to say it's not required.
It's not a requirement that you, yeah.
And I need to mention one very important point that I neglected to mention. Unlike the townhomes in the south, this builder has agreed to put into the deed restrictions to be controlled by the Townhome Association that no resident can have more than 2 cars, and those cars have to be parked in the garage. In talking to Rob Craig, who's the head of that Townhome Association, he says one of their primary problems has been their own residents with 3 and 4 cars taking up the street parking to store cars. So we think there's a way to control that through the deed restrictions and to specify that all surface parking around the area, whether it's public or private, is for guests of the townhomes. So that we can put that into the PD as a deed restriction that will be included.
Okay.
And then finally, I just wanted to say that if the applicant's willing to remove all the other uses except professional office, I think we should encourage that deletion.
Right, I think that's not a problem, and then limit it to 550 feet versus 1,500. That's a great starting place, I agree. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, sorry, I should have asked this earlier, but is this right? So I guess what we're called Unit 1 doesn't show any private pedestrian access? Is that accurate, or should there be something called out?
Hello, I'm Michael Garcia. I'm the architect for the project. Obviously, it's in the early stages.
And you were asking about private access to Unit 1, correct?
Yeah, all the other ones, there's I don't know which exhibit. It's B5. If you look at B5, all of the other lots there's private pedestrian access in the blue called out.
That's just a mistake.
Okay.
You ran out of website. So.
Okay, just checking, making sure whoever gets Unit 1 can actually get in.
That's never been the case.
All right.
Okay.
We'll fix that.
Perfect. Anybody else? Any questions? Any comments? Okay, you've got it all down, Lauren?
I feel it. I feel good.
Okay, very good.
Thanks.
Then we will bring Commissioner Watley back in before we move on to item 5. Someone want to run and grab her? Yep. Do you want to go there? Okay. Thank you very much. Commissioner Gallagher will get Commissioner Watley, and then we'll move on to item 5. Here she comes. Perfect. Perfect.
They didn't put a lot of effort in this thing.
No. That's why Don sent Les. He threw him under the bus.
He was busy.
Okay, we will move on now to item 5, reports. The 5A, Planning and Zoning Commission Liaison Report for the City Council meeting held on January 21st. That would be me. Very interesting meeting. There was a young lady named Sahana Gade. I believe I'm pronouncing her name correctly. Quite an accomplished young lady. She was involved in the Food Network Kids Baking Championship. She's like the Fort Bend ISD Spelling Bee winner. She started her own business. It's neat to see some of the wonderful kids we have. She's 11. 11 years old. And she's got a charity. Go back and watch the video. It was pretty impressive. And then this was the last meeting for Alan Bogart, our city manager. And so at the end of the meeting, he was recognized by Rick Miller. At the end of the meeting, he left and turned his seat over to the incoming city manager, Mike Goodrum, who many of you will remember Mike from when he was here before. And so anyway, Alan and his wife Claire will be living here in the city of Sugar Land. They plan to live here forever, Alan said, and Mike Goodrum said he hopes to follow in Alan's footsteps and retire from here and do the same. So anyway, it was kind of a bittersweet meeting. On the consent agenda, the second was the second consideration for the ordinance on parking garages. And then the only other thing that I think would interest the P&Z would be the first consideration of an ordinance that established spacing for freestanding signs located along Highway 6 where they were doing the widening project. And it required a variance for, I think, 4 different tracks. And I have the executive summary here if anybody's interested and wants to read it. I brought it. So that's pretty much my report. Item B, city staff report.
Your next meeting will be February the 11th, and we're still working on the agenda, so that's everything we have.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. By Commissioner Landine, seconded by Commissioner Stevens. We're now, all in favor? Aye. We're now adjourned. Okay.